Welcome to the Level Up Your Band podcast, episode 51. Hello, and welcome back to the Level Up Your Band podcast. My name is Gavin Patterson, and I'm here with Julian Pombo.
Hello.
How's it going today?
Oh, same old.
Same old.
Nothing's changed. Everything's the same.
So, Today we are back in interview mode. Up to this point, we've almost exclusively interviewed musicians, but today we've got a musician / something else. So we thought this would be a good interview to have. So today we're going to be interviewing Bradley Smith. Brad is a graphic designer based in Edinburgh. As well as working in design, he has experience as a bass player for multiple bands, of which I've been a part of in the last 10 years. I don't know if he's in anything now, we'll let you ask him. So we thought, due to his experience and knowledge in both music and design, he makes the perfect guest to have on the podcast, where design and music kind of intersects. So without any further ado, I introduce to you Bradley Smith. Thanks for coming on.
Hello.
How's it going?
I am grand, yeah. Actually be chatting to you guys instead of just listening to you on Spotify.
Yeah. So it's an interactive podcast for you today.
It's a really weird experience. This, I'll have to, I'll have to hide the eventual thing when it comes on Spotify.
Yeah,
don't want to hear it. It's good. We have actually played before, Gavin, haven't we? We've been in the same band a couple of times.
Yeah, back in I think 2012, I joined a band called Mercury Underground, which you were part of. You were bass player in that band. The band, I think, just before I joined, the band went through a little member change. The drummer left. The drummer who was incidentally on this podcast, Graham Costello, and one of my pals, Rob Shearer, who's also been on the podcast, joined as a drummer. And I think you guys were toying with the idea of having a keyboard player. And Rob said to me, "Here, do you want to play keys in this band?" And I was like, I'll give it a shot.
I always forget that you play keys, Gavin, and that you're really good at it.
I'm not. No.
I don't know, man. You are like every time.
I can play
every time
chords.
I've gone into the studio. Sure,
I can play chords.
I've seen you play like tasty licks on the keys.
Tasty licks.
I've seen you do that.
But yeah,
don't lie.
That's where I first met you. And your hair is almost going back to how it used to look. That sort of.
Don't draw attention to my hair right now. I say lockdown's been tough, right?
Yeah, I know. Like R.I.P. hairstyles. Yeah.
Yeah.
Sure.
So, yes, we were talking in a couple of episodes ago about having a graphic designer on, and lo and behold, we have a graphic designer on. So we'll kick right into it then. So, Brad, you are a graphic designer. So, first question. I actually don't know this. What actually got you into doing graphic design or being interested in that as a thing?
That's going back to school, I think.
Okay.
You go back to school and you're sort of in 4th, 5th and 6th year, you're sort of getting an idea what you want to do. If you want to go to college, or probably about the same time as you guys were discovering music properly and discovering what you want to do. I was in tech drawing class when we used to get T-squares out and sit in silence for an hour and draw the side of a house or something like that, or a cube. And my teacher was great, and he brought in a Gibson Les Paul one day, and said, "Do you fancy making the machine head from this in CAD?"
Wow.
Yes, please. Please take it apart and give me that piece, and I'll measure it up and do that. Started doing that, and then realised that I preferred making the leaflet that showed off the CAD model more than I actually enjoyed doing the CAD model.
Okay,
right.
And he kind of agreed with me because the CAD model wasn't very good, but the leaflet was all right.
Right.
So we could just get into it that way. And he said, "Well, here's the marker pens you want to buy. Here's how to draw the side of a car. Here's all this stuff you'll need to think about. And this is something called graphic design, and you can do it as a job if you
Right.
want." So yeah, that's where we started out. I mean, at the time I was playing in the band you've just mentioned, Gav.
Yep.
And that was, up until that point, sort of fairly serious. But I think my own role was probably what Julian would describe as a bass player rather than a bassist, given that I didn't really study it and I just picked it up to start messing about with it. And I think given that, I was always open to just canning the music and go and do something else. So I decided to do that instead.
Yeah. It's funny, like when you start out like in school and stuff, you get thrown all these subjects that you might not necessarily be good at or have interest in, but there are like side things that become the focus. It was the same thing for me as you were saying, like doing your CAD stuff. It wasn't necessarily the CAD stuff that you were interested in, but it was the sort of side parts of that, and it was kind of the same for me for audio production. While I was like interested in music, the recording side was definitely like I was drawn to that when I got to college. It's you end up you start doing one thing, and then it becomes something else. It just kind of evolves.
Yeah, which was this.
Yeah,
it's the same for me with flute as well. Like I took it really seriously, and I was just fanning about on my bass guitar in the background, and then that's what I ended up doing.
Yeah, it becomes the main thing.
It's funny how that always happens. It's always the side thing.
So it's quite unique in a sense to have like a graphic designer who's also musician, part of bands and stuff. So what do you think is the benefit to being in a band and also being, aware of graphic design? And do you think that played a pretty important role in the bands that you've been in, having an interest and a knowledge of graphic design?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think to begin with, there was no benefit. It was perhaps a hindrance because you now have to do that band's EP artwork and logo, and whether you have a good idea for it or not, or even whether you're capable of doing it or not. But I did do those things, and I think it shows you the other side. So from a graphic designer's perspective, you're sort of dealing with the work, but you're not the client. But if you've been in the band, you have been the client before, and it's kind of easy to understand where the bands are coming from when they're trying to explain what they want from artwork or a logo, and also kind of what they want to get from it. How much they can afford to invest in it, how much time you've got to come up with something, whether they want to look at t-shirts and merch and all the rest of it.
Yeah.
So if there is a benefit, it's really that. It's been able to see both sides of the coin, really.
Yeah. Because it's often overlooked by a lot of bands. Some people don't even get into it until they're, it's too late. Because we always talk about this, continuity, establishing a continuity, an aesthetic continuity. That's 100% graphic design. Like it's just so important, and a lot of people don't really think about it. So what would you say to a band who's maybe not, they don't really think about it, something they've put off? How would you convince them, like, you need to implement good graphic design in your sort of bands, what would you say to them?
I would normally start off by looking at the kind of bands they like and realizing that actually all of the albums you've got on your playlists or whatever, they all have professional artwork, because it's just the thing to do. If you're serious and you want to be taken seriously, then probably the best way of going about that is getting someone to really think about the artwork and treat it like its own thing. Because really the artwork is, I'm going to sound really cliched and cheesy, but it's an extension of the music, really, for a lot of people. I remember my dad explaining why they had all these CDs in the house. I'm like, what's it all for? He's like, oh, well, I like looking through the booklet, and I like looking at the lyrics on the back, and I like like just having the artwork there, because it's actually it sort of supports the music. It sets a tone for the music, and it kind of gives you an idea of what the creative direction of that band is.
Right.
So, I would say it's probably not the first thing on a band's mind to actually think about. When we record these things, we're going to have to put them on Spotify. There's going to have to be artwork, or we're going to put them on CDs and give them to people, and that's going to have to be in a box with artwork on it. But it completes the picture, and it really does level you up, I guess. If we're talking in terms of this, I can leave now. It takes you a step further to being taken seriously, I guess.
Yeah, I think it's also just another thing that popped in my mind. I think it can be also just a sort of genre specific thing, because I've noticed that certain bands and certain kind of scenes or whatever do take their art a bit more seriously than others and things like that. I don't know. It tends to be like I noticed being because I study jazz music, and jazz musicians don't care about what their album looks like sometimes. I don't know. Usually it's just like, I'm just going to slap a picture of myself on the front. It's certainly that was what they were doing back in like the late 40s, early 50s. I'm just going to look cool smoking a cigarette.
Having said that,
that'll sell.
I saw Fergus McCready's latest releases. He's a jazz pianist from Glasgow, and it's absolutely genius. He's basically, he just grabbed some rocks from some place up north and just put them on like with a white background. Just took a picture of each individual rock, and each individual rock was the artwork for a specific track, or I can't remember it was something like that. But it was like, it's so simple, but it just worked. It was so well put together.
We're getting the rocks, and I've actually put some thought into it.
It looks really cool. It looks really cool.
Yeah. Even if it's easy, it's still a sort of nice idea. But what you're saying there, Julian, about jazz artwork and maybe not being the most considered thing, you can definitely tell a jazz record usually by looking at the front of it. There's definitely and I think that's the same for a lot of genres where I think you guys might have touched on it before with logos. There's and websites. There's definitely an aesthetic that goes along with each genre, and I guess it's down to the band. If the band feels like it wants to just slot into that genre and be part of that scene, then by all means, just do that kind of thing. But it's not as creative as it could be, is it?
No, that's what I'm saying. It can really, I don't know, I feel like it can really give you a leg up if you just look, even if you want to go with some of the stylings that are there, that are part of the scene, sure, but like something else to give you a bit of a leg up, kind of stand out a little bit, can be really, really beneficial.
So one aspect that bands utilize about graphic design is for continuity is logos. Like some bands use them and some don't. What's your thoughts on band logos? Because they tend to be sort of not as popular maybe as they used to be.
Yeah, it's I've been thinking about that a lot actually just now, because I'm in the middle of doing one, doing
Alright.
a set of artwork for a band that you've had Rob on before, the drummer,
Uh-huh.
and them you've been mastering their stuff, and they are considering a logo as well, as alongside some artwork, and I see it two ways. A logo can be useful, and especially when you think about all the kind of social media platforms and the websites and even little bits of merch and stuff that you have to brand up. The easiest way to do that is to have a little stamp or a logo and just go, there it is, put it on there. Maybe a more interesting way to do it is to say, well, we won't have a logo, but we will have a consistent look and feel of the artwork that becomes representative of the band. And I think that's what I'm sort of trying to create with this job that I'm talking about. So, well, she could create a logo from the artwork, and I think that's probably a nice way to do it. You know, use the artwork and the creative direction of that to inform what the logo should be, and then it becomes an extension of the artwork.
Right.
I think I don't think you need it all the time. So yeah, I remember if you go to like a bigger concert and there's a t-shirt stand outside Hamden, for example, and you go up there and maybe it's a band like, for example, I remember seeing the Chili's there, and all the t-shirts, you got the usual ones that you see quite a lot, you know, the ones you see in, I think it was HMV at the time, you know, you just get the usual ones, but then you get the sort of slightly unusual, still Chili's t-shirts, but not with the same logo on it. They've got maybe a different logo or they've got a different artwork. It's quite nice to look at artwork like that where it can change. It doesn't have to be a consistent logo all the time, because the band might go through certain stages where the same creative direction won't work for all the music.
Yeah. Well, I was going to say, like when you're in a sort of an album cycle or an EP cycle, it tends to be everything you release at that particular time is all the artwork is themed through everything that you're doing at that particular moment. But fast forward to 5 years, it could be a completely different look, right across the board. It's that continuity that the music alone is not enough. You need something else to tie everything all together that sort of links the album to you, to the merch, to your videos, to everything. So what in doing in that process, like what makes it what makes a good sort of, you would say logo, but it's not really a logo, it's kind of a style. So what goes into making that stick, so that you get that, you know, sort of all-encompassing theme? What kind of things do you do to try and link all that together?
One thing that I like is when there's an album with associated singles that are all sort of released around the same time or in preparation for the release of the album. You can introduce a creative direction that way. So each album would have a very subtly different artwork. So it would introduce the theme. An example that comes to mind straight away is the sort of Tame Impala stuff around the time of the Currents record that came out, and there was a couple of singles from that, I think, that had, you know, the sort of lines and that sort of psychedelic look, and that sort of gradually brought in that sort of creative direction, and then you get the album, which is like the final expression of it.
Right.
I like that kind of approach, because you're building a sort of almost like a family of artworks around the main central one. But it's a funny one, artwork, because it's not as if it's that clear what's good and bad, because it is art at the end of the day, so you either like it or you don't. But the best stuff for me is the stuff that makes you look a little bit closer, and you can think about it or as its own thing, and maybe even put it on your wall and enjoy it as a piece of artwork rather than it simply just being the front of a CD cover. Now, I've actually got a couple on the little table next to me. As I was having a look through the cupboard, and I was like, wonder if I can find a couple that I actually like. And I came across these U2 records from the 80s. So there's, I think there's Boy, and I think that was first or second, I can't remember, and then War as well. So those have got a kind of similar look to them, with the black and white picture of the boy's face on the front. Different feel to them. One's very angry and one is very not angry. I don't know what that is. Melancholy. But they could have easily just done the same as they did on another album, which I think on October they just put a picture of the band next to some water. I'm like, that's so boring. Like, you didn't even put any effort into that. Come on.
Every band ever has done that. Like, let's go to an industrial estate and look moody.
Yeah, I was going to say, it's either like next to a bit of water or a brick wall.
Yeah.
But what was that they actively looked into the lyrics of the songs and what the songs mean, picked out a little nugget and gone, right, we're going to visualise that now, and we'll put the picture of the boy on the front and run with it for a couple of albums, and that becomes quite iconic.
Right. So if you're working with a graphic designer, it helps to share this kind of information with your graphic designer, your lyrics, the actual music, rather than just random rubbish. Because
it's a bit of a relationship at the end of the day. It's something to be. It's a project on its own, so you're going to be working together. It's not really I don't think it should really be a supplier kind of relationship. I think it should be more of a project thing where almost you sit down and get to know the band and what they're writing about and what their influences are and what kind of bands they talk about. And I think from that you can build a picture of what kind of art should represent what they've done.
So when bands are doing like graphic design, whether they're doing it themselves or not, what are some of the most common things that bands get wrong with graphic design?
So I've done a handful of bands so far. So like I said already, I don't really like a picture of the band on the front. I think
right.
that's like a last resort type thing. I also like it when the band doesn't try to define what it should look like before any work's been done on it. The way that's really nice to work is to talk about what kind of artwork you'd like, as in what kind of themes or what you want to say with it. Or do you want it to represent the music, or do you want to represent something entirely different, like a political movement or whatever? And it's better to represent that, or to sort of explain that that thinking behind it, rather than trying to define, we want the logo in the top corner and we want a picture of this in the middle. That's always, not even with bands, but with anyone, I'd say that the process at the beginning is just as important as defining what the end result is going to be.
Right.
Because if it just goes straight from point A to completion without going through the sort of motions of trying different things, it won't mean very much. It will just be a sort of flat thing that doesn't really have any meaning behind it. So so that's a long answer. So not to try and define the solution before it's done.
Right. Okay. So it's just basically allow your graphic designer to just do their job. It's very similar to sound engineers. Just like being told, like, this is just from my own experience, being told, when finishing the recording process, I don't think it should have that much reverb. I'm like, yeah, this is we're just recording. It's not done. It's like, I'm going to take this apart and like totally go through it. And just once I'm done, then you can critique and all this. Like, there's trying to map out the vision at the end, like what it's going to look like at the end is sometimes not helpful. Because it's a relationship.
I mean,
for sure.
There's an exception to everything. And I guess if the band or whoever you're doing it for has an absolute concrete idea, they just need you to help realize it, then cool. Yeah, it's up to you to do that. But you should always try and find some extra meaning in it, and try something different. I think I'm remembering back to one that I did for you guys. I think an Eriska artwork of a dog. The dog on the stage. That was a funny one, because do you remember that the sort of creative process to get into that point? We went through a lot of ideas, and they involved empty swimming pools and chickens and farms, and we're throwing around a lot of sort of derelict urban sites where we could take the band and do a sort of unusual picture. We even considered doing like a mockery of the band picture on front of the artwork, kind of thing, like in a 70s or 80s style, country style. And then what we eventually did was get a pub in Glasgow, I can't remember the pub, to lend us their basement and their stage, and stick the dog on a stool and get the band as the audience. And it's a fairly simple idea. And it looked quite unusual at the time we were done. It took a lot of editing. It was
edited.
And a lot of patience with the dog.
Dog was great. Very patient wee dog.
It was insane. I didn't know what it was. I'd been doing some work with him beforehand. Just some training here and there. So real loose cannon. I was genuinely so surprised that he was just able to just sit there.
Yep.
Just sit there and not move. I was like, this dog.
Yep.
What is happening? Being so good today.
Next to him.
Yeah. He didn't care. He was just like,
no.
This is all good, man. This is great.
Yeah, he's a good dog.
I was really he's still doing good. He's still great. So,
but back to but we always end up talking about animals or horses or dogs or whatever. Don't know what this is about. Just cat. It's usually cats, isn't it? It's always cats. You
will probably, from listening to the podcast, you'll always hear me cursing my cat.
Oh yeah,
Hazel.
Yeah, are they not around today? This cat.
No, Rachel's home, so they're just pestering her.
Brilliant.
When she's not home, they just they don't even come to me for any kind of positive attention. It's just to bug me. Like, genuinely, man. They're like, oh, Rachel's not home. It's okay. We'll just bug the fat man. That's what we'll do. It's always fun.
Anyway, so kind of moving on from the dog thing. When you get a project like that, when you've got a difficult band like us, want to do weird photography stuff, the thing that was a challenge was trying to take that photo, that sort of that feel, and trying to get that across all the domains, so like the website design, everything else. Yeah. Would you say what is either better or easier, doing a photography-based artwork or doing a digital-based artwork? What would you say? Digital,
because if the photography becomes digital anyway, you got to retouch it. You got to cut it up into different applications for like your social and the stuff you're talking about. You can just cut all that photography out of it. What I like about photography is it's always going to be less synthesized than just a purely digital artwork. As in, you're photographing something real. It's going to have real qualities. The dog is real, really does have kind of warm beer next to it, and as much as you can try, it's easier to get that across in a picture than it is in a digital illustration.
Right. So I've seen you in the past use a good combination between both. I'm thinking of the EP you did for a band back in 2013 or something, where it was a Taylor Red EP where you photographed you illustrated and then photographed an illustration, if I'm right in saying. Is
that was good. So I had the luxury at that time of well, you guys were being quite nice about it. Actually, you gave me quite a lot of freedom with the artwork. Even though between you couldn't really decide exactly what you wanted, I was like, right, I'm just going to go and do something. And you were quite good at just letting me go on with it, which is cool. I also had the luxury of a lot of space at that time, so I had I set up a big roll of paper for I don't know what this stuff is for, like lining paper or something you'd use for decorating, and cut out the shape of, I think it was a male and a female head, but different sides, so joined at the neck, and then the inside of each head so the heads would be cut out of paper, and then below that piece of paper there'd be two sort of colourful illustrations. On the female side there'd be something, and then the male side there'd be something.
Yep.
And the idea was that if you photograph these things from the top and lit them really carefully, you get really nice shadows straight away without going into Photoshop or anything like that. And that's what happened. We ended up with something that kind of looked a bit like it might have been done on a computer, just because it looks a lot easier to make it on a computer. But actually, at that time, it was easier to just get the paper out and actually create the illustrations as well. So get the pens out, and it was a bit of a weird one.
Cool.
And it was quite a nice one at the end.
Yeah, it was. It was really well done. And it worked in well with the music as well. It tied in really well in the end. So, like we talked about, like what's some of the things that bands get wrong. It's just the classic band pose against a brick wall thing. So, you as a graphic designer, what common things do you see other graphic designers do that you maybe wouldn't do? You think maybe that approach is not kind of the right thing. What is there anything you would say? I'm not a fan of that.
So I think a designer are trends that come and go, and they hang around for a year or two, maybe 3. And what we generally say is, if you approach a job, so you come to me and you ask, I want to do this kind of thing, and we go through all the correct procedure, and then on my end, all I do is look on Dribble, for example, or Pinterest, and look at the most trendy work that's happened in the last year or 6 months, and make you look like that. That's not right. I would say I was getting away with murder if I was to do that, because you're not really doing your job at the end of the day. Your job is to dig deep into what the band's all about and what the lyrics are, and create an artwork that represents the band and looks like the music, basically. And if you're simply making something that's trendy, that's not quite right. I think maybe a lot of pop records are a little bit guilty of that. If you look on, I think I looked on Spotify a while back just to get an idea of what was going on, and you can see a lot of stuff that's just, there's nothing behind it. There's no idea. It's just a look.
Yep.
Yeah, there definitely seems to be like from what the sound as well. There's like this huge sort of like 80s revival kind of thing happening. I don't know. It's bizarre. So there's loads of neons now, and like all that kind of thing.
I mean, I think those things are all right. I mean, you can. I'm not opposed to picking up something that happens to be in fashion and then running with it and using it to realize an idea. But just having neon on its own, like I think the 1975 record comes to mind, where there's nothing. I don't think there's anything going on except a wee bit of neon. Not at least not that I can read into it, but you're right. There's definitely an 80s thing happening.
I
like it. I personally like it.
Yeah, I mean, I like music like late 70s, early 80s stuff. So I mean, I'm not complaining, but it's definitely I would be interested to see how long that actually lasts.
Like I'm creating one just now that's actually got a bit of an 80s vibe to it, but mostly because there's a slightly 80s vibe to the music, and there's definitely an 80s vibe to a lot of the influence that went behind the music. So
right,
I don't mind that as long as it's rooted in an actual fact about the band or the music or like an inspiration, but just picking up a trend for the sake of it, nah.
Yeah. So I deal with quite a lot of bands in the studio, and some of them have like really good graphic design and some of them don't. How does a band go about choosing a graphic designer? Where would they begin? How would they start to even think about it?
It's a good question. So a lot of the time you'll either know someone that knows someone whose dog knows one, or you'll have to go onto a site like actually it might be Dribble. A lot of designers put stuff on there. There's a site called Behance, which is basically just a little portfolio site for designers. You'll find a few more of the sort of higher profile ones just by Googling designers in your area. I've had good and bad experiences of Gumtree, but generally find that Gumtree isn't really the place for that kind of thing. It is difficult. It's a problem that people don't have an ability to reach out to us or even find us. But I'd say that to pick one. Sorry, to pick one. If after you have found one or two or three, just have a chat with them or look at their portfolio. The portfolio is the main thing. If you're like a trad band and you see that they've done a bunch of heavy metal covers, maybe that's not the thing. Or it could be talk to them and see if see if actually heavy metal covers was outside their comfort zone. It's all just about try to see if there's a bit of an understanding between you and the designer.
Because 9 times out of 10 it's always like, oh, my mate went to college with a guy who knows blah blah blah, and it's always like word of mouth, 100%. It's the same with studios as well, like, oh, my mate's a bassist and he was in a band that went to this studio and they're really good. Sometimes it's a Google search, depends on the sort of size of the studio or the designer. If the designer's quite well known, it'll come further up in Google, especially if it's location based.
I would say that a studio, I'm just thinking, I'm generalizing here, but I can't imagine that any unsigned bands will have a lot of money to play with for something like artwork. And I would say that probably design studios are going to be a little bit out of reach. So you're really looking at individuals or teams of two to team up with, because their fees will be a lot more easier to swallow. To be honest, you don't need a design studio. You don't need managers, and you don't need you don't need a lot of people around you. You just need one, maybe two people who know what you want, and then just go and do it.
Yep. So if a band chooses to do artwork designed by themselves for whatever reason, how would you recommend they go about it? What processes would they have to go through to make sure that they were doing it somewhat correctly?
If they were doing it themselves?
Yeah.
So The main rule that we were taught to begin with at college was the tool, so your computer, your Mac or your PC or whatever software you've got, Adobe or Sketch or whatever, that's just a tool. Don't just go through all the available effects and splash them on a page and expect to have a masterpiece, because it will look rubbish. And also it won't mean anything. It will just be an exploration of your software's effects. So I would start off with a sketch. No, actually I would start off an idea, then a sketch, and use a tool, the software, to recreate your idea. If it is digital, it might not be digital, it might be photography. In that case, get the best camera you can get. It might be your phone. They're amazing these days.
Yep.
The cameras on the phones. So it might be a photography thing. But I would always start with the idea. The idea has to be, rooted in the music, the lyrics, the influence.
Yeah, that's definitely that's the same for anything really. It's even songwriting. If there's nothing, if there's no substance within the song, it's worthless. It's meaningless. We always say like write what you know, and if you don't know it, you can't design anything. You can't. It's just there's no substance there at all. It just ends up just a poser really. No posers here. So I think the common theme of this is it's got to be authentic, because you can tell if it's not. You really can tell. Yeah,
absolutely. And I think picking something out that, usually the music will have something in it for you to grab onto and then visualize that. It might be a simple little. Might even be a simple little love song or something like that, but there's ways that you can visualize that are pretty cool.
Yeah.
I've done that before. The stuff I'm working on just now, they're individual singles. So for a while, I just listened to the demos over and over again, and then listened to some things that sort of sounded a bit like it, and then went back to the demos and then had to think about how the music sort of made you feel as well.
Yeah.
That's how the 80s thing came about.
Yeah, I love the whole bands who are really good at doing this. I love what you can accomplish with graphic design. Everything from the artwork that goes online, on your vinyl, on your CD, on your merch, your poster design, your website design, the bass drum head on your kick drum on your drum kit, your overhead projectors. Some bands bring projectors and they have like just like projections on the back while the gig's going on, animations, even the lighting at the show, everything is all perfectly themed around a certain, they're in a cycle, they're in an album cycle, so everything is all beautifully seamed together. And you get graphic designers who do that professionally for bands full time. That's their job, is to make this continuity.
Yeah, one of my favourites is Hugh Syme. He did all the Rush covers and did all the sort of creative direction for the visuals. And he worked really closely with Neil Peart on the lyrics. Him having written most of the lyrics, and that's where the ideas would come from. So yeah, he's basically stayed with the band for a good while. I think all through this sort of late 70s.
Yeah.
In the 80s, worked on a bunch of records, and each record had a bit of I'm just a huge Rush fan, so I would put it on my wall anyway, but you might want to put some of it on your wall. It's just a nice artwork.
Yeah.
You could say the same for lots of sort of other proggy artworks at the time, like Yes, and stuff that Pink Floyd and Storm Thorgerson were doing. It's all lovely stuff.
I love just the potential is endless. It's just your only limit is your creative inspiration. I just love that. And if anyone's listening and is thinking about this kind of stuff, it's a good incentive to go out and really think about how you can improve your band's aesthetic and just how it's all encompassing. It's all it's a clear professional message, and it's an extension of the expression of the art. You can get really cool and really creative with it. That's why I like it so much.
Yeah, so I guess it's a slightly different thing for small bands or the kind of smaller gigs that we might be talking about. But when you go to a bigger concert and you see all the merch and you see whatever's at the back of the stage and you see the bass drum skin and maybe a couple of guys have got t-shirts on, or you just see the overall aesthetic and you're like, yeah, I'm in this band. All the people around me have got the same looking stuff on. I can see the same little visual motifs and little logos and stuff. And if you can recreate a little bit of that at King Tut's, then yeah, the fans will love it.
Yeah, and it's not insanely expensive. I mean, even if you're unsigned and you don't have anyone backing you, you're going to want to be selling merch anyway. You're going to want to be releasing stuff and making posters. So you might as well make it all themed and all in the same art design, because there's nothing more jarring than having a designed poster by X person and then another thing designed by Y person, and it's completely unconnected. I've seen that, like just random stock posters or random artwork for this thing, and then it's completely detached in the next instance. It's confusing. So yeah, I think that's a pretty good sum up of the whole thing. Is just see where it'll take you, and don't be afraid to reach out to a graphic designer and have them use their expertise to just let them take their own creative control of it. Obviously, if they're not going down the path that you want, you can always say, but these people, like yourself, you've done this for years and years. You know what you're doing. You've got to trust the person. There's this sort of you've got to let your baby go a little bit. Trust that they're not going to drop your baby in the first day.
Yeah, I mean, there's probably a few common anxieties that people have before reaching out to a designer, even once they've got through the hoops of actually finding them.
Yep.
One of them is probably cost. And the cost is something you just got to be upfront about and say, listen, I've got a budget, it's high, it's low, it's this.
Yeah.
The designer, either that's within the designer's kind of ballpark, or the designer will say, no, I can't really do that, or they'll just say, right, well, let's work to what we've got, and try and, because at the end of the day, they want to create cool stuff just as much as you do.
Exactly. Yeah.
The other thing I would do is, like you're saying there, Gavin, you're sort of putting your baby in someone else's hands and going, sort of look after that and make sure it grows up to be something nice. And something nice. And usually you start off with having, you don't just go away and come back a few weeks later and go, it's done. Do you like it?
No.
No, you work together on it, and you have times where you review progress. You maybe come up with a few ideas, put them on paper, have a look at them, have a chat with the band, see how they feel about each one, and then you go through sort of little iterations until you get towards, you get narrower and narrower until you get towards the thing that you want.
Yeah.
And it shouldn't be something that makes you regret having done it.
No. Cool. So yeah, that was a pretty meaty interview, if I'm looking at the time. Thanks for doing this, by the way. This has been great. Finally talking about other things other than just the music itself. So where can people find your work if they're looking for it?
Now here's part of the problem. I don't actually have a website live at the moment. Go on Twitter and just search for Brad ___ Smith, because for some reason I set that as my username many years ago, and it's a nightmare to tell people that, yeah, I'm on Twitter. Behance is good. Should be on there. Behance is just Choka. If you're looking for designers, then yeah, get on there. Yeah.
Cool. Well, thanks again for doing this. It's been great. And you can let me know if you listen to this episode when it comes up on your Spotify in 3 weeks' time.
I won't do that. But the only episodes I've not listened to.
Just Mark has listened to. Like you've just pretend you've heard it. Anyway, as always, if you enjoy listening to us ramble on about music stuff, please leave us a review on Apple Podcasts. That'd be really sweet. And you can check out our website at levelupyourband.com. And we're on Instagram and Facebook and all the rest of it. And YouTube. We'll be releasing all the videos from everything on YouTube as well. So, thanks again, Bradley, for doing this. Next week will be episode 52. And that will be 1 year of episodes. So we'll have been doing the podcast for a full year. I think episode 53 will be the first episode of the second year of doing this. So that's pretty cool. I didn't think we'd get this far, but there you go. That's crazy, isn't it?
It's almost one a week.
It is one. Well, yeah. We did one way back. We did 2 in 1 week, which I hate because it's mucked up all the continuity, but it's fine. So anyway, hope you all have a good week, and we'll catch you next time. Right? Bye.